introduce to you my dear friend Tracy Palangin. Tracy has a very long resume. We don't have enough time to go through it all, but just a couple of highlights. She is the co-founder and CEO of Social Finance, which you all may know is a national nonprofit and registered investment advisor since its founding. Has mobilized over $400 million in new investments designed to achieve improved outcomes across a range of issue areas. Prior to Social Finance, Tracy was a managing director at the Parthenon Group and worked at Wellington Management and McKinsey and Company. Just an incredible leader in our field. I'm so thankful for her friendship and mentorship. She is also a member of the board of the Boston Foundation, so I get the great privilege to work with her a lot. So with that, Tracy, I'm going to turn it over to you, my friend.
Thank you so much, Orlando, for that generous introduction, and good morning, everyone. My exciting job this morning is to introduce Melissa Hoffer. Melissa, it is such a privilege to be in conversation with you this morning. And for those of you who don't know Melissa yet, you have to get to meet her. And you also have to meet a very great Boston Globe article describing this very unique approach that Massachusetts has taken on to tackle our climate challenges. Massachusetts is the first state in the country to have a cabinet level climate chief. And Chief Hoffer today is going to tell us about her whole of government approach in tackling our challenges and achieving our climate goals. She calls them our climate mandates. And I'm sure she'll explain why she has chosen those words. In particular, we are going to have a chance to talk about the workforce challenges in order to achieve our climate mandate. And we will have a chance to dig into that deeper with my good friend, Dwight Poehler, talking about the Climate Careers Fund in the second part of this webinar today. I'm proud to be a friend and a fellow traveler of Melissa, both metaphorically and physically, because we announced the Climate Careers Fund at the Vatican Climate Conference earlier this year. So Melissa, thank you so much for joining us today, and I'm delighted to be here with you.
Well, thank you so much, Tracy, for that very warm welcome. And also, Orlando, I want to thank you all at the Boston Foundation for hosting us here this morning. In particular, shout out to Orlando and Julia. Also, my huge thanks to the whole team at Social Finance. It's just been so much fun to work with you all on this project over the past year. I want to give a shout out to Heidi, who I see here and has done such hard work, and my colleagues, Emily Reichert, who runs Mass CEC, and Jennifer Applebaum, who really led this work on our side. So thanks very much for having me, and I'm really excited for the conversation.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Those warm words, Chief. Maybe just set the stage for us. How is the Commonwealth thinking about the climate goals or our climate mandate, and maybe highlight a couple of the key areas you're particularly focused on?
Sure. So I'm going to start by talking to you a little bit about how we do what we do, because I think that's really important. And what the governor did on our first day in office, and very first executive order, was to establish the Office of Climate Innovation Resilience and my position, which is the first cabinet level position in a state government that is solely focused on climate change. Now, some of you might remember who Gina McCarthy is, and you might remember when Gina went into the Biden administration, one of the first things President Biden did was establish the Domestic Office of Climate Policy, which had a similar function in that its goal was to drive climate change through the mission of all the different federal executive agencies. There are some other models for this that, of course, Massachusetts pioneered. Some might remember Doug Foy's Commonwealth Development. That happened during the Romney administration, which was an effort to try to de-silo some of the environmental work that was happening between housing and transportation and the environmental agencies. So there are some precedents, and I am standing on tall shoulders here. But our goal is to, I like to think about it as injecting climate change into the DNA of all of the secretariats. So what is very important about it is that, and I want to just say at the outset, this structure, I think, is one that can be exported very easily and will be to C-suites around the country, to other institutions, and to other levels of government, because climate change is the defining megatrend of our time, and it touches on everything That's why it's important for everybody to kind of get their arms around it, whether it's Health and Human Services. I was just meeting with Secretary Walsh. We did a huge convening with hospitals yesterday, whether it's public safety, whether it's transportation and the like. So to have our CEO, the governor, signal very early, this is going to be a top priority for this administration. And you know what? It can't just live in the environmental agencies, because of course that's been the precedent, where it would be the purview solely of EPA, or at the state level, our state Department of Environmental Protection, or our state Department of Public Utilities. So it's the regulatory authority, the ability to drive through incentives, the kind of collaboration that we're going to talk about today. All of these things need to happen throughout government. So that's the theory. And then the administrative infrastructure for it is the executive order. And it creates something called Secretariat Climate Officers, which these are not new positions, but they were people who were expert in their agency missions and also had an aptitude or a desire to work on climate change. And so there are folks now in every agency, and at this point, they are more teams than one individual, and they own the climate agenda. The executive order also tasked me with providing recommendations to the governor at about the 6-month mark. And so, I developed and interviewed tons of people and had, worked with teams across all the secretariats to figure out what was working, what was not, where we had gaps, what the trends and barriers were. So those recommendations are publicly available. They're called recommendations of the climate chief, and you can read them to kind of get it. That will give you a very good sense of where we are moving overall. Tracy mentioned why I call it mandates. And that's because the Commonwealth was one of a handful of states back in 2008 that actually passed legislation that requires us to have an economy-wide reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by a date certain. That means we are also required to do a clean energy and climate plan. In 2021, that statute was amended to mandate a net zero by 2050 reduction. So when I'm talking about getting to net zero, it's not a goal, it's not a target, it's actually a legislative mandate. We've been sued over it in the past. The SJC has been very clear in its interpretation of that statute that it means what it says. So we are mandated to achieve these emission reductions, and we're doing it across the 4 key sectors that you're all very familiar with: buildings, transportation, power sector, and then natural and working lands we look to for what we call negative emissions, and that's their ability to draw down and sequester carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. So I think about a couple of things I'll just throw out, and then I want to turn to the barriers question. It involves a lot of cross-agency collaboration. So the executive order posits a lot of authority in our office to drive this mission, but of course, the most effective way to do it is through collaboration. So we focus on collaborating and partnering. I think of it as a graceful de-siloing. Climate change requires a lot of generalists and a lot of collaboration between people with different types of specialized expertise. So this executive order drives us towards those types of collaborations. And last of all, it's an innovation how we do governance, because at a very blunt level, institutions like state government and many other institutions unintentionally are structured in a way that produces the conditions that result in climate change. That's the simplest way to think about it. And so you really have to turn the ship of state around and make internal institutional changes so that you are producing the conditions that get us to a clean energy future. The biggest barriers are the ones that would easily come to mind. There will be technical barriers. There are financing barriers for achieving that net zero by 2050 goal. I am confident that we will overcome those. The technology we will get to, the finances evolving, lots of really smart people working on those problems, and we have the great good fortune to be working with many of them. The one that keeps me up at night is institutional change. This is a change management task. So I spent my holiday last year beginning to do a deep dive on every piece of reading I could find about adaptive management, change management. Some really great folks have offered me some time to think about how they've done it at corporations that are facing, crisis moments. So that is really the thing. How do you get people to do things differently And how do you get institutions to change the way they are thinking about their missions? And how do you do that in a state government environment where you don't have some of the incentives that you might have in the private sector, like bonus structures or the like?
Mhm. That's fabulous, Chief. And I know that workforce, you've repeatedly said, is a significant barrier. And throughout this journey, the better part of, all of the year, calendar year 2024, we've been working together and talk about whole of government approach. It's not just talk, it's actually in action. Every week, we have a meeting with the chief, with the representation from economic development, education, labor and workforce development, energy and environmental affairs. Is literally the expression of whole of government approach to think about how we might address this workforce shortage in order to meet our climate mandate. Tell us about that.
So yes, this has been a key focus for us. And as you just said, Tracy, it really does involve multiple different secretariats because they all touch on this issue. So I just want to kind of start by framing kind of the issue here. And I will say there's some bright news on this front. When we started, we had a 37,000 worker shortage for this is the estimate of how many workers we need to meet our 2030 climate goals. Now we need 34,000. So it's still a steep curve, 5 years out, but needing 34,000 workers. And these are workers at all different stages of clean energy workforce development. Whether these are the technicians, whether these are folks developing new clean energy technology, people installing solar PV on roofs and other surfaces, people who build the offshore wind and the like. So we need a lot of workers. We have an acute shortage of electricians. We have about 100,000 clean energy workers in Massachusetts today, so it's a big industry for us and it's growing. We have about 7,000 clean energy businesses in Massachusetts. We've seen 80% growth in our clean energy industry since 2010, and 80% of new jobs that will be middle to high income jobs are clean energy jobs. So this is a really, really key sector for Massachusetts. Much depends on our ability to keep growing it. And what we've done is we've looked at all the kind of different stages of a person's career development and thought about how can the state get in there to direct people and provide them with the resources to pursue these careers. So for example, Secretary Tutwiler, if you don't know him, is our phenomenal education secretary. And he has created what we call innovation pathways, several innovation pathways for students. These are students who are in high school to become accustomed to and we will buy them, HVAC units, for example, so they can figure out how to fix them, how to install them, and have that experience when they get out, so they are teed up to get good paying jobs. The point I wanted to make as well is that in his opening remarks, Orlando talked about how, at TBF, they're working very hard at the intersection of climate and equity and economic development. And that is really the governor's vision, and it's really all of our visions as well. So we think about workforce development not as separate from our equity goals. And that's particularly true in this climate space. And you think about the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, it's really a force for equitable investments. Just in the past 2 years, Mass CEC has invested $34 million in 300 minority and women-owned businesses and equitable training programs, for over 2,000 residents. So this is huge, and we prioritize that. It's very, very important to us that this be a just transition. So that means as we are shifting to these clean energy jobs, we are really bringing people along who have been left behind in other circumstances. So that's very important to us. Just a few words about some of our other programs. Mass CEC itself has an internship program. They've placed over 6,000 interns at 600 unique clean energy companies. So these are folks who get the opportunity to really work within a company and then have a bridge to job placement. They get exposure to these real world careers in our climate tech industry. And we've created a number of collaborative programs to get older adults into this space too. We have a career technical initiative that extends vocational high school programs to adult learners They can come in the evenings. We have Mass Connect and now Mass Educate, helping adults get back to school. And of course, we have Mass Talent, which is our online portal that connects employers to job seekers. And that has a special focus on clean energy. It was one of our priority areas. So just a few words quickly about economic development. Listeners probably know that the governor has proposed a $1.3 billion investment in climate tech as part of the economic development bond bill. And we see that as a really vital part of keeping Massachusetts competitive. Right now, we're among the top 4 states in the country for climate tech. We have a proven track record on this in life sciences, and we know we can do it. And we know that this can be a part of the way that we have a just transition.
That's fantastic. Chief, we can't thank you enough for your leadership in this space. Your passion is palpable. Your creativity, your pragmatism is palpable. And we're so lucky to have you in this first ever cabinet level climate chief. And we agree this is going to be exported easily around the country. Shortly, we'll hand it back to Orlando. But what the chief said about all the great strides that the Commonwealth has already done, both from the state as well as the Mass CEC. But what we hope to do with the Climate Careers Fund that we're developing in conjunction with the state and Mass CEC is actually have a holistic approach to achieve the 34,000 worker skills gap so that we can actually meet our 2050 goals. So for that, please join me in thanking our chief, and I'll pass it on to Orlando again.
And Tracy, before I get off, if I may, I want to just share one really important thing that the office is doing, and this is the really wonderful lesson I think that comes from having worked with you all on the Climate Careers Fund. Part of what we are trying to do is create models for how we do things a little bit different around this finance piece. So, you and I had been talking a little bit before this about what are some of the things that I am most proud of. And I think there are 2 kind of categories. One is the category of how to partner differently and use different financing models. The Climate Careers Fund and the Massachusetts Climate Bank are sterling examples of that, where we are doing things very differently. We have never had a public-private partnership like this for job and workforce training. So it's extremely exciting to us to have the ability to blend our resources with social finances to create an outcome for people that provide services that they wouldn't otherwise have. This is going to mean people getting jobs that otherwise wouldn't be able to, because they might not be able to afford textbooks or be able to have the opportunity to take the time for the study or to have daycare or even a laptop. So that's a way that we really walk the walk around equity. And similarly with the Climate Bank, that's a brand new financing model for us, where we don't typically finance things like that. And here we are decarbonizing affordable housing, again, placing equity at front and center so that the folks who have been left behind in the past are going to be the first beneficiaries of decarbonized housing structures, which means healthier housing structures, which means housing structures that are cheaper to operate, lower energy costs. And we're doing that by using a traditional retrofit financing model and weaving into it all of the new federal decarbonization dollars plus private dollars that we can leverage to de-risk those transactions. So I just wanted to point out, like, that is one category, and the other very quick category of things that we are doing are working directly with the regulated community in a way that is collaborative. So we just yesterday had a huge insurance convening, or last week with insurers to talk about climate risk to insurers and what the state can do to help make and continue to have our insurance sector be solvent in the face of these climate risks. And yesterday we met with our hospital partners who now will be tracking their scope 1 and 2 emissions and putting together a work group to reduce them. So these are very different and innovative ways. And the Climate Careers Fund was right there at the start, helping us figure out how to do some things that are very different for government. So thank you.
Thank you for leading in these cross-sector, interdisciplinary approaches. Thank you again, Chief Hoffer.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Tracy. I'll pick it up. I'm gonna try to move us along pretty quickly because I want to make sure we have plenty of time for Q&A with the audience. I see Dwight's already joined us. Dwight, I'm not going to read your very lengthy, powerful bio, but there are a couple elements in your bio that I think are relevant and people should know. Dwight Poehler, board chair of the Boston Foundation, another friend that I get to work with a lot at the foundation. Dwight is the founder and CEO of Accel R8 Ventures, which is a fund investing in early stage climate change mitigation technologies. Dwight has been an active philanthropist in Boston and in London and so many communities. He also spent years at Bain, where he helped to deploy $10 billion of equity capital at market leading returns. And for a person who works in philanthropy and in the nonprofit space, he is the best kind of philanthropist. You know, you talk about time, treasure, and talent. He is a hands in the dirt kind of philanthropist that, you know, if you're in my job, you love the opportunity to work with. And so, Dwight, I will leave it to other folks to read your full bio, but thankful that you are here with us and doing this work with us today. So next 15 minutes or so, I'm going to ask a few questions to Dwight and Tracy, and we're going to try to leave a full 10 to 15 minutes at the end to take question and answer. So why don't we just get straight into it? How's that sound?
Sounds great.
Sounds great. All right. So Tracy, to start, we've heard a little bit from you and Chief already about the Climate Careers Fund, but what about the initiative are you personally most excited about?
Thanks, Orlando. I'll pick up where Chief Hoffer ended, which is that there is a massive influx of federal dollars and private sector dollars. So this workforce skills gap is not just a challenge for Massachusetts. It's actually an opportunity and a challenge nationally. Brookings actually recently released a report that between the IRA and the bipartisan infrastructure law, that we're going to need 30 million new workers. Many of these jobs are actually climate jobs, and there's a debate, what is a green job, what is not a green job, but we're talking about large numbers. In Massachusetts alone, the chief mentioned that we need 34,000 workers to achieve our climate goals, and the status quo isn't sufficient to deliver this kind of volume of skilled workers. The beauty is, you know, I think we've mentioned, if we can have a skilled workforce, these are great jobs. So one is a win for people, two, it's a win for business, and three, importantly, it's a win for climate. So what exactly is the Massachusetts Climate Careers Fund? We are trying to raise at least $5 million in philanthropic capital, and we have some exciting early momentum and news to share this morning. But we're trying to raise at least $5 million of grant capital to match the state's commitment. This pool of 10 plus million capital is going to support specific pathways targeting low-income residents across the Commonwealth to get jobs in energy auditing, in HVAC, in electrician, in plumbing, in wind turbine technician roles, etc. But exactly how it works and how it's different from the status quo, I'm going to describe a few features and explain to you how it works. So say I'm a fast food worker right now in Massachusetts, but I've always been interested in, say, becoming an HVAC technician, which, by the way, is an excellent job because in Massachusetts, the median salary for an HVAC technician is $74,000. And we know that there's tremendous upward mobility potential. The Climate Careers Fund would then enable me to enroll in a high quality program. These are typically certificates that take several months, up to 12 months, in vetted training programs like FC Tech, like Greenfield Community College, at no upfront cost to me. Now, however, as a low-income person, it is actually more than tuition support that typically one needs, right? Like, how are you going to put food on the table? How are you going to pay for transportation, childcare, rent, etc.? So the fund also provides a zero interest, no fee, outcomes-based loan. I know it's a mouthful, and I explain to you how it works, to cover all this cost, tuition, living stipend support, etc. After I graduate from the program and I land a well-paying job defined as hitting a minimum income threshold, then either I or my employer, because we're fulfilling an HR problem for the employer, would repay the principal no interest, low fee over a period of time. So for example, if I took out a $6,000 zero interest loan, I would pay $100 for the next 5 years, 60 months. And at any given point in time, if I fall out of the workforce, if I dip below the minimum income threshold, I owe nothing. And all these payments from the worker, from the employer, will be recycled back into the fund so that you can stretch the impact of each public dollar, each philanthropic dollar, so that more people can get served into the future.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, I love the focus on those barriers we often don't think about that take people off track to achieving their career aspirations. I think it's brilliant. Dwight, do you want to add anything to what you're most excited about?
Yeah, for me, climate mitigation is just critically important, and we're just not making fast enough progress. And so this particular program is really interesting to me on three key fronts. One is practicality. The technologies are developing quickly. I see it in the investment world, but the big challenge to scaling them is workforce. A workforce trained that can deploy it at scale and at speed, whether it's solar, wind, heat pumps, EV stations, et cetera. So this program directly gets at that challenge. Politically, much of the resistance to address climate change is fear from people that work in or affected by the fossil fuel industry. And so, what's going to happen to their jobs this year, as opposed to in the decades that climate change will impact us. So politically, we just need to figure out a way to demonstrate to people in those industries that there are lots of jobs in climate mitigation and resilience. And so when they can see this kind of positive job opportunity, we gain critical voting support. And then socially, we all know that those who have benefited least from fossil fuel economy are those that are most negatively impacted by climate change. And so, this is an opportunity, which is really kind of like our responsibility to get good jobs to those people who are most impacted by the negatives. And the financial support of this training program just exactly gets at that issue. So on three fronts, I just love this.
Yeah. Well, let's keep going, Dwight, on what we need to do. What do we collectively need to do to rise to the bigger challenge of addressing the climate crisis?
It is a dauntingly large and complex system of challenges. We've got science, innovation, technology issues. Those are highly intertwined with policy and regulation and legislation, all that is pushing towards one big objective, which is to change consumer and business behaviors towards low emission outcomes. And we often think that if we just push our good ideas that are positive, we're gonna make the positive change we need. But it really is as important, and possibly more so, to mitigate the sources of resistance to that. And again, I use this example of a belief that fossil fuel reduction reduces jobs, or that a low carbon economy has to feel worse or grow more slowly, and those just aren't true. And so the more people we get trained into these climate careers improves the economy, it builds support for positive change, and philanthropy just has a unique role here to be catalyst capital, because we can prove what works and what doesn't. Social finance has come up with an incredibly effective way to get this project primed and then bring the government in. And they ultimately play the bigger role with legislation and regulation that has much broader impact. So I consider us incredibly lucky to be in a state that's so committed to mitigating climate change, not just here in Massachusetts for Massachusetts, but to create these kind of innovations, as happens on the technology side, that are role models to the world. So this is a rare opportunity that we can bring public and private resource together.
Awesome. I love to hear you and Tracy both maybe, is there a larger narrative change work that we have to do? To the point you were making, Dwight, people feel like they might be taking something away from somebody or some industry. Like, how do we get broader society to have this sort of public will to realize that we need to make these changes? I don't know if you have any ideas or thoughts about sort of that public will building aspect of this climate change work.
It's tricky because we're going to learn a lot more about this next Tuesday. It has unfortunately become a significant political divide, and unfortunately it has been led by one party and almost consumed by that party. And we need to figure out a way to keep reaching across party lines so it doesn't become a political issue. I know there are Republicans that want to engage on it. This is a great example of a market-based economy solution. There's so many market-based things in climate. And so I really think for us to go out of our way as often as we can to figure out how do we reach across and bring people that might have a different political perspective on this over, such that we can get the flywheel going on political change.
Yeah, on that point, we've been working around the country, social finance, building these innovative workforce partnerships. So we have around a $300 million portfolio around the country, both place-based funds in New Jersey, in Connecticut, in Colorado, in Detroit, in addition to Massachusetts, as well as national sectoral funds. So we have the National Google Career Certificate Fund. We're raising another fund to address the national nursing workforce shortage crisis. What we've learned across the country, and we're so excited about this first ever workforce fund focused on climate jobs in Massachusetts, but what we've learned across the country, that these ideas are bipartisan, because it's good for individuals. You're expanding economic opportunities and increasing economic mobility for human beings. Two, it's great for business. Business cannot cope. These new climate companies, these clean energy sectors, 7,000 companies in Massachusetts, the chief said, and growing because of the governor's investments in climate tech, they actually cannot cope with their business unless they have the workers. And then three, the triple win, right? The climate win. And what we're seeing around the country is that, why is this resonating on a bipartisan level? I think there are several things. One is that everything is geared towards outcomes. The outcomes focus and orientation exists every part of the way as we build these partnerships. What does that mean? From the learner's perspective, the current deal is that all the risk is placed on the learner. They typically take out loans, take out time from school to pursue these educational pathways. They may or may not land a great job. Here, it takes the risk away from the learner. They get flexible funding to address both tuition needs as well as life needs, and they only repay if they get a good job. Two, we're also very focused on allocating resources to institutions and training partners with a track record of actually delivering outcomes for people. We have so many amazing partners in the Commonwealth and even across the country, but typically funding may not be going toward places with great results, and funding may not be perhaps cut if you have programs that are not delivering results. So I'll give you an example in New Jersey, which is the first state that we launched a pay it forward fund, because funding gets recycled into future, hence we call them pay it forward funds. So we launched the fund in New Jersey in 2021, which is aligned with the state's economic development agenda. So offshore wind, IT, and nursing. Along the way, we fund these programs, and we're seeing differential results of our participants going through various programs. In one particular program, which is the cybersecurity program, we're actually not seeing graduation rates and job placement rates. We turned off the spigot of that program and doubled down on allied health and nursing roles. And what did our state partners tell us? Like, in government, you cannot have that agility. Even if you know you need to do this, you can't just like double down on things, turn things off, and just reallocate things dynamically. So that is a very exciting aspect of these programs. And in New Jersey, for example, since the initial, again, $10 million pilot, 5 from philanthropy, 5 from the state, they have each legislative cycle, they've added more money into the fund, and now the fund is $24 million because, again, philanthropy catalyzed the public purse. And then the final aspect that has really resonated across the aisle for governors and mayors is this stretching the impact of each dollar. You know, maybe 50 cents come back from workers and employers, maybe 80 cents come back, but the idea that your dollar can have more than one life, you can really address the challenge in a much more sustainable way.
Excellent, excellent. For funders and donors interested in supporting climate, what should they consider? And maybe, I don't know, maybe we'll start with Dwight, given your deep investment in this work and this kind of work.
You know, I'll always say voting is the number one thing you can do. We just have to get the right people leading the prioritization and policy making. So I have to start there. From there, I think all of us on this call that have, you know, financial resources, networks, et cetera, we need to have a combination of philanthropy, policy advocacy, and investing. They're all critical if you have the networks to do it. I think what's the most interesting consideration on this specific product is social finance set it up in a way that, A, we can use DAF funds. There's trillions of DAF funds sitting idle. Donors want to support climate. So this is providing a vehicle for donors to express something they want to express in a way that has real impact. Two is, as Tracy mentioned, because we recycle the funds, the donors were putting in catalytic funds, but as they get paid back only by people who actually get sustainable jobs, we then can basically expand the program more widely. So we're recycling it going on. None of the money comes back to our DAFs in this specific case. It keeps going out to expand the program. And then a nuanced benefit of recoverable grants like these that's really important to understand is when they're done, a huge amount of thought and interaction happens up front with the training providers, with the government, et cetera, to define very clear, measurable outcomes, to think through the detailed logistics, the feedback loops, and ensure that every dollar has the maximum impact it can. It's just a different dynamic than grant funding, which often kind of goes in, you hope it works. It often does, but sometimes you don't always know it does. And in this case, a huge amount of thought goes in to just have a feedback loop that I know it will be effective.
Excellent. Tracy?
Yeah, just to quickly to wrap, we are so excited about this Massachusetts experiment. And we know it could work really well because we have experience working in other sectoral skills areas around the country. So we got to get this done in Massachusetts, and we're off to a great start. But more importantly for Massachusetts, I'm excited about two things. One is that this could serve as a blueprint for the nation. Every state is going to struggle with this, especially as the IRA funds begin to flow across the country, both the federal dollars as well as the private sector dollars. So Massachusetts has a huge opportunity to lead for the nation in this area of the green workforce and innovative finance to support that goal. And then the second thing I'm really excited about is going back to where Dwight started this conversation. We can shift the political narrative. The clean energy sector is going to create lots of jobs, just like other sectors have, the fossil fuel industry and other sectors. So this is the area where we can really animate it for the country. This is industrial kind of sector 3.0. It can create a lot of jobs. These are great jobs that have economic mobility built into many of these jobs. And it should be a bipartisan thing. So for all these reasons, we're really excited to get this Massachusetts Climate Careers Fund going.
Excellent, excellent. I have a couple of questions, but I don't want to jump in front of the audience Q&A. But I do want to ask Roger from GitLab to maybe come off of mute. I understand we might have a little bit of exciting announcement to make today. Roger?
Yeah, for sure. And thank you first and foremost. I think this is a really special opportunity, and thank you for the panel, the early morning inspiration. It's I'm on the West Coast, so it's a little earlier inspiration than I anticipated. But my name is Roger Perez. I work with the GitLab Foundation, and at the GitLab Foundation, we're all about economic opportunity and mobility. So we're looking to ensure that lower wage workers are on strong career paths, thinking about increasing their income, thinking about getting to new sectors, new industries to improve their livelihoods. And this past year, we've been deepening our climate work and our green jobs work and thinking about what new industries and new sectors folks are moving into. And super excited to connect with Heidi and connect with Jake on this opportunity and learn how they're developing a fund that is leveraging both public and private sources. It's geared to removing barriers to employment. For us, removing barrier movement is huge. And then ensuring that folks are on career paths that are going to continue to grow. And that's one of the big themes that I gathered here today is thinking about, what the future is for jobs and thinking of how to get lower wage workers to there. So we're so excited, in fact, that this past week we are committing $500,000 to help drive this fund and hopefully encourage other folks to come along. So no big questions for me, just words of gratitude. Thank you all for the work that you're doing and looking forward to seeing it grow.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you, Roger. Tracy, do you want to say thank you to? I'm guessing you.
I want to say, Roger, thank you, Roger, and all your colleagues of the GitLab Foundation. Really grateful for your early support.
Thank you all.
Really powerful. Thank you, Roger. I might jump in and ask a question before we open it up. I don't know if we have any new questions in the chat, but remind us, and I heard the chief talk about this a little bit, Tracy, but what do we consider climate jobs and careers, just so we're all sort of starting from the same place?
It's such a great question. I think the definition of a green job is pretty elastic. And we know that climate mitigation and resilience is going to require a lot of jobs that's kind of touching on infrastructure, but not every infrastructure job is a climate job. So with that caveat, we're seeing just large number of workers needed in occupations like electrician, line installers, pipe fitters, and other what we call middle skills jobs. Not to mention, as we said earlier, HVAC technicians, energy auditors, and various renewable energy occupations. So, but we're also very focused on jobs that are well paying. So we really want to support individuals in demand, good paying jobs. So looking at median wages, looking at mobility in these various roles over time, and then importantly, finding the right training partners, whether it's community colleges, voc tech schools, or nonprofits, community-based organizations that actually have a track record of preparing people for job success.
Great, great. Chloe, should I turn it over to you for some question and answer from the attendees?
Sure. And as a reminder, invite folks to use the raise hand function or submit questions via the chat. So Tracy, maybe this is another one for you that's come in. I would love to understand if there's what the evidence is around this kind of model working.
Yeah, around the country, as I mentioned, we've been building these partnerships for the last 5 or 6 years, using these quote unquote pay for success principles. And what we're seeing across the board, importantly, are these feedback loops that Dwight mentioned, right? When something is working, we double down. When something is not working as well, we work really hard to course correct. And if we fail at course correction, we halt those programs and halt funding. We're also learning a lot. At the beginning of this journey, we were very focused on just supporting tuition. And then over time, we've been doing experiments around living stipend support. In the Google Career Certificates Fund, which is a $100 million facility focused on enabling low-income people to get certified in various IT skills, cybersecurity, IT support, user design, project management, etc. We have a really interesting set of findings where for one provider, there's actually no need for tuition support. So we gave a living stipend loan, again, 0 interest, 0 fee, and we're seeing extraordinary increases in graduation rates and job placement rates, because as we said earlier, and Orlando, firsthand, lots of things come in the way of people's journey to achieve economic mobility. So the ability to have flexible funding and people have the agency to spend that money, in this case, it's a $3,000 loan to, meet emergency, such as in childcare and rent and food and transportation, has just been hugely beneficial for people's persistence throughout these programs.
Thank you, Tracy. Let's turn one to Dwight maybe, and then we have Kate raising her hand and another couple of good questions in the chat here. So we'll try our best to get through these.
Let's go to Kate first and go to some of the other questions, and I'll
okay, sure. Go ahead, Kate.
Hi, thanks everyone. I'm Kate Dobin. I'm a philanthropic advisor. And one of my questions was about the employer's role in this. And so Tracy, I believe you mentioned that there could either the individual that goes through the training or the employer might be the one to repay the loan in this sense. And I know that in the Up Fund, you all had much more success when the employers were the ones paying back the loans, incentives were aligned well, and also information gathering was just so much simpler. And so I was wondering if you all have an opinion yet on how that's going to be structured and what the employer's role in general will be financially in this product.
Thanks for that great question, Kate. We absolutely believe that the employer needs to be actively involved in both the design and ideally in the financing. So first of all, the employers really need to inform the curriculum, so we make sure that people are actually trained for skills that employers are looking for. We really want employers to have good handoffs with the training provider so that people are actually getting job interviews, getting the jobs in a much more seamless way. And three, obviously the holy grail is for the employer to repay on behalf of the worker, because the employer experiences a very strong ROI vis-a-vis turnover costs and recruiting costs, et cetera. We have not secured broad-based kind of employer contracts yet for the Massachusetts Climate Careers Fund, because as you can imagine, a lot of the employers in this space is actually quite fragmented. So unlike what we're doing in the UP Fund and our National Nursing Fund, where you have large hospital systems and it's easy to sign those employer contracts, we're working selectively, but also working very hard to find the employers to pay on behalf of the workers, because the best thing is for the worker to graduate and have a job debt-free.
Thanks, Tracy. Another question here that's come in: what is the expected scale of the fund? You mentioned this a bit, Tracy, but maybe you can reiterate what we're hoping to raise for the fund and the Commonwealth's contribution.
Yes, so this $10 million pilot should serve up to almost 3,000 learners in the first cycle. As people graduate, get into good jobs, and they start repaying typically over 3 years, the money is going to recycle, we estimate, at a 1.5% rate. So we'll likely get kind of half of that back. These are conservative assumptions, and then it gets to recycle again. So over time, you can imagine serving many more multiples of that initial 3,000 learners. What we're hopeful, given our experiences in New Jersey and other states, is that the Commonwealth will see that this is working and add more resources to the fund over time, because again, as philanthropy would be a great catalyst, it's really the public purse can really take these programs to scale.
Can I just jump on that question really quickly? So I get that it's a pilot and we're hoping to catalyze more buy-in from the state, but success in this first round in terms of persistence and resources coming back, 1,500 folks are in jobs and that stick and persist. Or do we have a sense of what impact we're chasing for this first round?
I'm happy to invite my fabulous colleagues, Heidi Hudson and others, to jump in, but I think more than half of the workers will get jobs. But we're estimating payments to come from around half the workers. Is that right, Heidi? In the first round?
That's right. We understand that for a variety of human reasons, folks may not complete the training, but we're hopeful that we're able to achieve somewhere on the order of 90% completion. And then of those that complete, we're hopeful that all of them will get placement into jobs that are good paying jobs in these industries, but also recognizing that we won't be able to achieve 100% there. But we are, based on the track record of the training providers we partner with, think that 80% placement rate for those who complete is realistic. And then from there, we make other assumptions around, of those who are placed into these good paying jobs, there may be a number that don't repay the loan as expected. But what we're hoping is, and what we're seeing our other funds across the country, is that by providing the downside protection for students, we offset a lot of the common reasons why individuals default on their student loans. And so we're hopeful to see solid completion rates in this fund as well.
Excellent.
Thanks all. I want to give one last opportunity for a final question before turning it to Dwight and then over to Tracy in Orlando to close us out. Hearing none, Dwight, I will.
None. It's just a testimony to how well Tracy explains it and has thought about it in advance. I too want to add to the momentum that Roger started and also put forward a challenge to all of you. This program for me involves everything I think is important: climate mitigation, expanding economic opportunity, the social finance pay it forward model, the Boston Foundation, and establishing Massachusetts as a climate hub. So toward that, I have committed $1 million in a matching grant to seed this effort, hoping that larger foundations among the group might join to build that matching grant. to catalyze broader participation through TBF, Fidelity, other community foundations. I just highlight to all of you, and I hope you can highlight it to your constituencies or DAF holders at foundations. This is just an amazing way for foundations and philanthropists to use DAF dollars to contribute towards climate and economic justice at once. So it is these opportunities don't come up that often, and this is a really special one, particularly because it's already linked in with the government. So I just want to do a little bit more to kind of seed that effort and motivate everybody to go out into your networks and see how big we can make this fund.
That's extraordinary, Dwight. Thank you. Thank you.
Unbelievable. Very, very great. Great, Dwight. Thank you. Tracy, we have a couple of minutes. Do you want to say any final words, any final comments before we close it out?
Not really any final comments, but I'd love to kind of pick up where Melissa kicked us off this morning. She talked about a whole of government approach. What we're trying to do here in the Massachusetts Climate Careers Fund is a whole of ecosystem approach. We are bringing in government, we're bringing in business, we're bringing in philanthropy, we're bringing our education and training partners so that we can actually serve residents in the state while also achieving our climate goals. So we really hope that all of you will join us on this journey, and please reach out if we can answer any questions, because I know these models are a little bit complicated, but we're very, very excited about this first in the nation Climate Jobs Fund.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you all for attending, participating, for your questions. Thanks to all the speakers for the launch of this critical initiative and for taking the time to explain the fund and what excites them. Tracy, once again, thank you and your team for your innovative leadership. Really amazing. I had an opportunity to watch up close the work you've done since 2011. Dwight, thanks for being the kinds of hands in the dirt philanthropic leader. I'm going to coin that phrase. That's my new phrase. And to Chief Hoffer, Julia Howard, to Heidi, the entire social finance team. Thank you for this partnership, but just your bold leadership on this really important issue for our communities, region, world. So thank you all. Have a great weekend. Please reach out if you have any questions.